In this video, we're going to take a run through how to transfer an Amazon Seller Central account from a seller over to a new buyer or legal entity. I've transferred hundreds of seller accounts over the years, and I've tried to distill down the simplest and most efficient process of how to get that done. Never had an account run into issues, never had an account suspended. It's a bit of a common myth in the space that Amazon does not allow Seller Central accounts to be transferred. If you follow these steps down to the letter, I'm confident that you can do it efficiently and without running into any major headaches. So what are some of the common reasons that someone would transfer a seller account from a seller over to a buyer? Firstly, most common one is if the business has been sold. So if the business has been sold and needs to be transferred over to a new buyer, that's the most common reason you would transfer an account. Second one I've seen over the years is the seller has potentially changed their legal entity, and therefore they need to transfer the account over to that new legal entity. And then the third one is aggregators consolidating brands. So aggregators, you currently have brands across multiple legal entities, putting them, consolidating them to one core mother legal entity. Whatever the reason, well aware that transferring a seller account can be a high pressure process, especially if it is due to a sale. Again, that's why we put these steps together to help you do this as efficiently as possible. So what are the methods of transfer? Really, there is two main methods of transfer, either a Seller Central account transfer, which is where you transfer the entire Seller Central account, or a listing transfer. And this is where you manually transfer the listings and the seller keeps the account and the listings go to the buyer's account. A Seller Central account transfer is highly preferred. You can get a Seller Central account transfer done in 48 to 72 hours. It is the most efficient way to transfer an Amazon business. If you're doing a listing transfer, there is a ton of additional steps, and you're also going to be moving across physical inventory. In my experience, this can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months, sometimes upwards of 3 to 6 months, depending on how fast Amazon is with removal orders, how efficient buyer and seller are with logistics and supply chain. So I would, if you have the option to do a Seller Central account transfer and avoid a listing transfer, I would very much urge you to go down this Seller Central account transfer route. And that is what we're going to focus on in this video. Just to note also, this video is going to be focused on US and Canada transfers. UK and Europe have a bit more of a convoluted process. I do have a process for UK and European businesses. If you are interested in that, just leave a comment and I can put a video together for that. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be focused on US Seller Central account transfers. So first thing you need to do is get prepared for the transfer. So firstly, as a buyer, just make sure that you're eligible to sell on Amazon. What does that mean? Essentially, you have not been banned or ran into any other issues in terms of suspensions with Amazon Seller Central in the past. If you have been banned or ran into any sort of account violations of a serious nature in the past, then yes, you won't be able to take over a seller's account. Also on the seller's side, so review the account, make sure there's no outstanding violations, no outstanding suspensions or serious warnings. Once that's done and you know that both buyer and seller are eligible to operate a Seller Central account, the buyer needs to prepare the following details ahead of the transfer. A credit card and bank account that have not been associated with a seller account in the past. And I would, for the credit card, just do a few charges on it ahead of the transfer. And that's just going to let the credit card company know that the card is active. I've seen situations in the past where the buyer has got a fresh credit card a few days before the transfer, and it wouldn't register on Seller Central due to the fact that it wasn't registering with the credit card company as an active credit card. So get a new credit card as the buyer, or use an existing credit card if it hasn't been used in a seller account in the past. Use it a few times, just log some transactions just to make sure it works. Then the buyer needs a registered address Ideally domestic, just helps to make things easier. And when I say domestic, I mean domestic to the US or Canada. If it is abroad, it can work as long as you're in one of the approved Amazon selling countries. There is a list that you can find online. But yes, ideally domestic if possible. And then buy a legal entity, ideally US LLC or US, any type of US legal entity really. And also that legal entity cannot be used in any other Seller Central accounts. Very, very important point. If a legal entity has been used in another Seller Central account, it should not be used under any circumstances to take over this new account. One legal entity per Seller Central account. Also, buyer ID documentation. Not a guarantee that Amazon will request this, but always good practice just to have this ready and on hand in case Amazon do a manual review of the account and request this information from the buyer. So typically that's going to be a passport or driving license plus a utility or credit card statement that's dated within the last 3 months. And then finally, a phone number. Again, a phone number not associated with any other Seller Central accounts. So make sure all your ducks are in a row in terms of those different details. And then once you have all of that prepared, you can then move on to the next stage in the process. So next stage in the process is on the seller's side. And here you're just going to create a script, standard support script with Amazon Seller Support in the help section of your seller account. And you're going to put the following: Dear Amazon Seller Support, I am contacting you to let you know that I'll be traveling over the coming weeks and will be logging into the account from various locations. Please put a note on my account to ensure that no safety locks are put in place. So here we're just letting Amazon know that, look, different IP addresses are going to be logging into the account over the next few weeks. Don't put any sort of account restrictions in place or log us out of the account or anything of that nature. I would not mention the fact that the account has been sold. From my experience, it's not necessary and it's not advisable. When you contact Amazon Seller Support, you're likely just going to go to the first line of support, which can be 50-50, let's say, at the best of times. So I would just not even mention the fact that the account has been sold. I've sent this script hundreds of times. I've never encountered any issues with this. And yes, it's not a necessity to let Amazon know that the account itself has been sold, and it's likely going to cause more issues than solutions. So just let them know that different IP addresses will be logging in, and then you can move on to the next stage, which is the actual transfer of the account itself. So I like to do this by getting both buyer and seller on a call, having the seller set up a screen share, logging into the Seller Central account, and then changing out the different details in the account in this order, which we'll run through now. Also, just a note here, try and follow these steps in the exact order, just because this is the order I've been following of the successful seller account transfers that I've completed in the past, and this generally seems to work the best. So both on a screen share call, seller logs into the account, go to settings, account info, and the first thing I would change out is the legal entity and tax information. So buyer's going to give you the details of their legal entity, and they're also going to give you their EIN number, and that's going to be used in the tax information stage. So once that's all complete, I would then just change out the returns information. So if the seller currently has set up a manual returns address, just change this over to the buyer's address. If the seller just has returns going directly back into FBA, you can leave that setting in place if you wish, or if the buyer wishes to set up a manual return address, you can also enter that in place and change the settings. So once that's complete, then we're going to change out the credit card details, and this is underneath charge method. Again, buyer just provides their credit card details, seller changes those over. If there are multiple countries, so for instance, Canada, Mexico, and North America, you're going to have to change out the credit card details for each of those countries, as Amazon doesn't unilaterally change it out for you. So change out the credit card details for all the countries associated with the account. If there is going to be any point in this process which is a little bit sticky, it's usually the credit card and bank information. Now, nothing bad will happen to the account itself, but Amazon can sometimes log you out, keep the seller's details in place, ask you some authentication questions, just due to the fact that this is a financial aspect to the account. And it's a bit more sensitive. So don't worry if any messages pop up. Don't worry if anyone from Amazon contacts you. Just let them know that you're trying to change out your details and you won't have any issues. So once credit card details have been changed out, next we're going to change over the banking information. Again, buyer provides their new bank details, seller changes that out, and do that for all countries associated with the account. At this point, seller can now go into their registered email and just confirm that Amazon has changed over all of the information. Once that's all confirmed and successful, you can now change the login information over to the buyers. Before actually carrying out this stage of changing out the login information, I would advise that the seller just has a little click around the account to make sure that everything, anything that needs completing over the next day or so is complete. So customer service messages, any shipments that need creating or working on logistics-wise, any PPC data that needs changing over or adjusting. So I would just advise that the seller goes ahead and does that now or ahead of the call, as once we change these login settings, we're going to have a 24-hour cooldown period when no one can log into the account. So seller, change out or any details that need changing or complete any tasks in the account that just need doing over the next 24 hours. So we're going to now move on to changing the login settings. Again, just in Seller Central, settings, login settings, and try and follow these steps in order. So store name, sometimes people leave the store name in place. Sometimes buyers want to change this over. Obviously, completely down to you, but go ahead and change it here if required. Next, we're going to do phone number. Buyer's going to provide their phone number, which hasn't been used in a seller account in the past. Seller's going to change that over. Authentication method. So here, either the buyer can use their phone number or potentially can use Google Authenticator or Authy. Any of those is completely fine. Just get that changed over and then remove any seller authentication methods that are in place. Email, buyer's going to provide their email. Again, seller, change it out. And then the final point is the password. So to note here, once you change out the password, you will automatically be logged out of the account. Once you're logged out of the account, I advise buyer and seller not logging back into the account for a period of 24 hours. This is what's known as a cooldown period. And that just lets Amazon register all the settings, less likelihood of a security check going in place. Because if you think about it from Amazon's perspective, financial details have been changed, the new IP is logging in. There's a lot going on. So just try and minimize that as best as possible. And I just advise a 24-hour cooldown period to help ease that process, essentially. What the buyer can do at this stage is, because the email address has been transferred over, the buyer can now just log into their email account to just make sure that everything, just make sure they have a confirmation email from Amazon letting them know that the email is now associated with their account. So no logging in for 24 hours at this point. Transition period. So after the 24-hour cooldown period, the buyer can now log into the Seller Central account and should begin to review the following items. Firstly, I would just check the product pages. So go through the listings, make sure everything's live, make sure nothing funky has happened over the past 24 hours. Prices are still the same. PPC is still running as intended, and all listings that should be live are currently live. Then go through and review financial information. So bank account and credit card details. Just a reminder, credit card details are underneath charge method, and make sure that the ones in place are actually yours as a buyer rather than the seller's previous details. I have seen a few times in the past with a successful account transfer, Amazon, for whatever reason, has still reverted credit card details back to the sellers probably because of a security flag or something of that nature. So yes, I would just give that a bit of a check and make sure that nothing has been reverted back over to the seller. And just do the same with legal entity and tax information. I've never seen legal entity or tax information get reverted, but still just good hygiene practices to make sure that that information is now formally yours as the buyer and you have formal control of the account. And then, of course, just make sure that anything that should have been done over the past 24 hours now gets done. Customer service messages, checking PPC, working on any shipping plans, etc. The only other thing you could consider here is potentially adding the seller onto the account as a secondary user. What this means is just during the transition period, the seller's likely still going to have some input in terms of helping guide you through the different processes of the business. So how to run advertising, how to create shipments, and stuff of that nature. If you want them to have a bit more of a hands-on approach, you can consider adding them as a secondary user, and you can also set them up with restricted access. So whatever you feel comfortable them having, certain reports, certain sections of the account, etc. So at this point, Seller Central account should now be fully transferred over and in your control. I hope that was useful. As I said, I've transferred over hundreds of seller accounts in the past. I do offer this as a service through our agency. If you're interested in having us either help you out with the process or handle the process for you, feel free to drop me an email at george@elevatebrandsstudios.com and we can talk further about helping you out with getting that done. Thank you.